Why do I like flying? Well, I went for a ride in a microlight 30 years ago, and that was it. You know, it was and look where it's got me. Yeah, well, in my 30 years, the first big thing we did was I flew a microlight from London to Cape Town, which was, I only had about 90 hours on my logbook when we left. You know, everyone thought we were completely mad, but I got there. It took 10 months, but we got there. And then I came back and did a couple of competitions and thought, well, this is quite easy. And it was mainly because I was very, very familiar with my machine by that time. And so I won the European Championships in a couple of years after that, and then the World Championships and things. And, and then we did various different things. You know, went and did some aero towing in Kenya, and I got carried on with I sort of, and then I got involved with paramotors and organising paramotors competitions. And what other long flights were done? I flew, towed a hang glider over Everest, and then we went and towed the same guy, Italian guy, over Aconcagua in Argentina, which is the highest mountain outside of the Himalayas. And we've also done a flight over Kilimanjaro. In fact, I had a go at flying over Kilimanjaro back in 1986 when we were flying down Africa, and I got to, it's 19,340 feet, Kilimanjaro, and I got to about 18,000, which wasn't bad on a 450cc two-stroke. And I flew with a blind co-pilot from London to Sydney 3 or 4 years ago. That was a funny one because I only got involved with 24 hours notice. There was a phone call. You know that blind man who's flying to Australia, who's leaving tomorrow. You saw him in the papers. Well, his pilot's dropped out. Do you want to do it? And sort of, well, I know nothing about it. Better go and have a look. And they were fairly well organised, not brilliantly well organised, but fairly well organised. And so I said, well, give us a couple of weeks and I'll be able to get visas and sort out this and this. They didn't have a complete set of maps, and you know, there was funny things like that. And and they said, well, no, we've got to go tomorrow because we've got this schedule of events all laid on and everything. And the saving factor was it had the ultimate sponsor it was a sort of, the sponsor was absolutely wanted to do it, and money was no object. So, and we got there and to Sydney, arrived in Sydney the day they wanted us to arrive. So, delivered the goods, you know. The guy who took me was at the very early days of two-seaters. In fact, it was pretty much the first two-seater that came out. And I clearly remember this chap who's a good friend of mine still, but he said, oh, let's do this. And we did a manoeuvre called a whip stall, which is where you kind of power it up and then the nose drops and you're looking straight at the ground, and then you go like this. Well, nowadays you don't dream of doing such things because there's actually quite a high risk of it tucking, and then if it does that, then then it tumbles and the machine disintegrates and you die. And but nobody knew that sort of thing then. So and then when I was actually learning to fly, I learnt down in Cornwall, and the training machine was brand new out of the box, and he hadn't set the throttle properly, so every time you put it back to idle the engine stopped. So my first 10 hours of flying, every time you landed it was with the engine off, so it completely got me over the whole business of engine failures and everything. Oh yeah, landing without engine is no big deal at all. Yeah, I mean, these days you get the engines are so fabulously reliable that people do tend to fly them a bit like Cessnas. I mean, the Cessna mentality is that the engines never stop, so when they stop, they crash. You know, because they don't have to. But the mentality with microlight, certainly in the old days, was that the engines could stop and did stop quite often. So you flew with always an eye to somewhere to land. And if you were flying across the channel or something, then you knew that you were taking a risk. It was a risk that you kind of, you accepted. But you tended to fly. So if you were, relatively low and you came to a big forest, you were prone to sort of fly a little bit around the edge, so that if your engine stopped, you could land in a field or something. And you still do that today, but a lot of people don't, because they've come up in this, been sort of learned to fly in this culture of fantastically reliable engines, and but they still do stop occasionally. And the trouble is that, so when they do stop, it's, oh my God, the engine stopped, and they crash. Well, I mean, on the face of it, you can land anywhere, of course, but of course you can't, because you have the wonders of Sastrugi, which is this horrible stuff that it's waves in the ice, and if it's anything more than probably a few inches, then you're gonna be in trouble. So what you really don't want to do is to get to be flying in deteriorating conditions when it gets to the point where you can't really tell what's on the ground to land on. So you've got to fly super conservatively. If it looks like the weather's deteriorating, land. And our whole strategy is going to be a strategy of sort of waiting. So you sit in your tent. You might have to sit in your tent in a gale for a fortnight, and then suddenly you'll get a calm spell, or a relatively good weather spell, and then you go for it. And of course it's light the whole time, so you just go and go and go and go until you get, until you can't fly anymore. So you've got to be sort of, that's going to be our strategy. Well, this expedition is not to be underestimated. A lot of its success will be in the detail. And I was reading something where the Americans refined the difficulties of Antarctica to a number, and it's something like 2.76, which is how much longer it takes to do any ordinary task in Antarctica compared to anywhere else normal. So what we've got to do is to make sure that there's just simple things like plugging in your intercom. If it's a fiddly little thing, then it takes 2.76 times more likely to get it plugged in, to break it because it's gone brittle in the cold, all sorts of things like that. And so it's the detail that is going to make or break this expedition.